From our studios, this time in Japan and Tampa. I was like, where was I? Oh, yes, Tokyo.
Where are you? You're Tokyo. Yeah, you're in Tokyo.
There we go, Tokyo. And, this is Green Tech Theme Park in 30. I'm Philip, and I'm joined by my co-host, Scott Swenson of Scott Swenson Creative Development. This week, I thought we would start off with a story from Japan because there are some things that I can talk about firsthand. So it's a little bit of a continuation of our previous story about the town that was blocking the view of Mount Fuji, but essentially the numbers just came in from April, and it says that Japan welcomed over 3 million visitors for a second straight month in April, and arrivals in April were up 56% from the prior year and 4% higher than 2019. I think that's the key number, 4% higher than 2019. And of course, the
2019, yeah.
So it's really, again, like this whole thing we've been talking about for weeks, right? 4% isn't huge, but it is an increase over 2019, and 2019 was, the year. So it's definitely modulating. And of course, the yen is in a 34-year low right now, which has made Japan a bargain destination for foreign visitors, with arrivals set to blow past the annual record of 31.9 million seen in 2019. So hopefully this year they'll have set a new record from 2019. While that's good news for Japan's economy, which shrank by 0.5% last quarter, it has caused friction with locals. We already talked about some of the friction in the previous story, but there's been just a lot of other random friction. And I think it's something that I'm here right now. I've been traveling around and just kind of going to tourist and non-tourist areas and studying people and engaging a lot with everyone and talking to foreigners and whatnot. On the ground reporting, I guess, is what you could call it. Maybe. And so I can say,
or vacation. You could call it a vacation if you really wanted to.
I don't know.
No, I'm
I don't
kidding.
think I can do that. To me, it's really interesting because you can really feel that there is this dichotomy happening right now where essentially I think in 2019, obviously, there was we've talked about all this. It's this pandemic echoes. There was a whole high of tourism, and then we talked about this as well. But all these places, they had to shift over to being only locals. If you remember all the stories we reported on previously about the co-working from the Ferris wheel and how initially they had opened up the Ghibli area, but it was only locals, and it was so they
don't panic, just pivot.
Right. So everybody pivoted, and now they're trying to pivot back, but it's not quite going that well. And it's this weird dichotomy where, and I think if you boil it down, it's they're trying to decide, is tourism meant for locals or is it meant for foreigners? And the reason they have to kind of choose a lane is because of the weakness of the yen. So if you're going to make it for foreigners, then the prices are going to be foreign prices. But that's not sustainable for the locals. And then you kind of get into this weird Japanese morality type of thing, which is that, a lot of these places kind of like serving the locals now. They like it being a thing for locals to do. But if they, raise the prices then to capture that margin for the foreigners, then the locals aren't going to be able to afford it. And so I think where they've landed right now is this weird middle ground where things that only foreigners use are priced very high. Well, not high for Los Angeles, but very high for Japan. But then things that the locals use are priced locally. And I want to try and give you some things because it doesn't make any sense. And when you're here at 34th year low, it's hard to put your brain around that. But some numbers to give you. So I had a quick service dinner at Tokyo Disneyland, and it was about $7. And it's the curry dinner, which I think if I were to get that in Los Angeles, what is about $19. So so basically when you're at that conversion, you're looking at, about 50 to 70% off is what you should be expecting in that range. But then, getting an Uber, or a taxi is, I'd say, the same price, if not more. And hotel rooms are insane. I could not find a hotel room this midweek, this like Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday for less than $380 a night, anywhere, even not even close to Disney, like in anywhere in the prefectures. So, but buying food and the subway is like $1 to get across the city. I mean, there's this weird dichotomy where all this stuff. And the other few things I've noticed is this dichotomy. I think the main thing is the money, but it's also like I don't know how to explain, like the experience where there's a lot less English than there was when I was here in 2019. Even, yeah, really. And it's, yeah.
It's been 5
Yeah.
years. It's been 5 years since, they were, catering
Yep.
to U.S. tourism. So yeah, that actually makes total sense
Yep.
to me. It's sort of like when you talk to, look at it this way. There's been an entire generation of high
Yes.
school students who did not have the influence
Yep.
of English language. So they're now in the workforce, or even university students. They're now in the workforce. And so, of course, there's been a change of the amount of English spoken. It's interesting, as you were talking about this, because we were talking a little bit before we started recording, but as you're describing this now, it takes me back a long time to when I was visiting the Soviet Union the year before the Soviet Union split up, because they were trying to do the same thing. They were trying to find ways to cater both to the locals and to the tourists. And what they actually did is they created complete different subsets of tourism. So, for example, there were hotels that only locals could, only residents of the Soviet Union could stay in, and they were very, very inexpensive. And they catered to the lifestyle of those people who lived in the USSR. Then there was sort of that interim version, which is where we were lucky enough to stay, quite honestly. And they were, you could stay there if you were a guest of the state, or if you were an international student. So it was kind of that mid-range. And then there was the tourist range, which was the absolute highest. So that was how they did it. Now, I'm not saying this is what Japan is going to do or even should do, but there are ways around this, because I think you're absolutely right, Philip. The concept of how do we not lose the local tourism base that we've built over the last 5 years, and how do we continue to encourage international tourism, because you need that. All of the post-crisis leadership mentality is keep parallel paths going, so that who knows what's going to happen in the future.
Right.
So you got to keep them both going. And so maybe that is what's going to end up happening, is that there are things that are exclusively for outside tourists. I mean, let me give you another weird example. There were things, and this is, so keep in mind, Soviet Union broke up in 90, 91, something like that. It was late 80s, early 90s when I was there. And I think it was 90. Anyway, there were certain items that you could not even purchase legally with rubles, that you couldn't purchase with the local currency. You had to buy them with what was called hard currency, or currency from outside the country. So that's pretty extreme. And I think there'd be probably some pushback in Japan, but there are certainly ways to do that, if that is indeed your desire, to keep the locals continuing to travel and continue to purchase things, but also catering to and saving things like, again, Russia or Soviet Union, saving things like caviar, vodka. You could not buy either of those things with rubles when I was there.
That's fascinating. I think that is related, kind of, the last thing I was going to mention on this, that I actually honestly really had no idea. I just, people I am a planner normally, but in this case, I really just showed up in Japan and then figured out what I was going to do. Um,
No spreadsheet,
no,
Philip.
I just kind of
Wow.
like I was like, here we are, and I was like, oh, my hotel's in the red light district. That's okay. It's okay. It's all right. It's Japan. What's going to happen? But especially with me. But so
I was going to say,
yeah, they have this program they're running right now. It's sort of similar to that, where essentially foreign tourists can shop tax free at a lot of places. You know, it used to just be like there's like duty free, you would get the airport or whatever. I mean, now it's like
mhm,
at
mhm.
most of the main department stores, the shopping districts. I mean, all sort, like imagine most malls and even thrift stores. I went to a thrift store and got some stuff there, and they offered a tax free version. And what they do is they scan your passport and they enter it into this electronic tracking system, so it tracks all of the tax. And there's this, of course, I read up on all of it because I'm crazy like that, but there's a lot of rules into it. You know, you have to have your passport stamped, it has to have like dates in it, and it has to be meant for tourists showing up and wearing it. And technically the officers can ask you to produce the item, so it has to be something you keep in your carry-on or you're wearing on you when you are going through customs, so you know you're not getting multiple of them. But yeah, it's all tracked digitally via your passport, and they scan it when you exit. And of course, you know, you might still have to pay duties on it if you're coming into the U.S. or going to another country, because it's different. But essentially, that knocks an extra 10% off. So it's like there's really incentivizing shopping at these places, you know, and for no tax at all on them. And that's, I mean, even 10%. Like, I mean, earlier I was saying I was wandering around the some of the big shopping areas in Ginza, and I was saying that like the import brands like the, you know, Prati and Dolce and Gabbana and Valentino, like they're the same prices that you would pay in Los Angeles, except I don't got to pay tax on them. So even at 10%, if it's a
Right,
$2,000 item, I mean that's a chunk, you know, that might sway you potentially in that way. But then if you bought anything local Japanese, um, you know, it's much cheaper because it's the Japanese version, you know, a Japanese brand, but you're still not paying taxes on that. So it's even cheaper. So imagine you're getting like 60% off of a
right.
thing. So, yeah, so similar to that, very interesting. But um, I think my point overall with this is exactly what you were leading at, Scott, which is where do we find that line? And it reminds me too of it's always I think it's always good for us to have these things flipped on us, because when I was wandering around trying to trying to get shoes in Japanese sizes and trying to get like a Japanese menswear, and I have no idea what the 1, 2, 3 means. I don't know what that means. What's a two? Um, but and nobody spoke any, you know, English, and I'm trying to translate signs with my phone and speaking a little bit of Japanese, but just enough to try and not be offensive. It reminded me that as you know, as difficult as it is, where you know you're in these major shopping districts and there's no English, and you're like, wow, there's no anything in America. So like if again, it's to say if we flip it on its head and be like, oh, you know, if I were somebody who really didn't speak English very well coming to America and we're trying to attract all these foreign visitors, like, you know what, like at least the signs at Tokyo Disney and around the places are bilingual. A lot of them are bilingual. You know, maybe the ride isn't bilingual, but at least I can, you know, navigate around. Like you can't do that at most. No, there's no bilinguals. When's the last time you've seen a bilingual sign in America? Like,
Right. Well, and it's interesting because in traveling in general, they will do bilingual as, and I've seen this happen in the UAE. I've seen this happen in Saudi. I've seen this happen in Germany. I've seen
mm-hmm.
this happen in Rome. I've seen this. The signs are in native
Yes,
language and
yes,
English, because English seems to be that homogenizing factor in many places. Is it may not be necessarily catering directly to either folks from the UK or from the US, although it is a way, like, for example, people I was traveling with, they were from Brazil, they spoke
yep,
English, and therefore, they were able to communicate when we were in these other countries because they may not have spoken Arabic, but they spoke English, and the signs were in English. The other thing that you mentioned too that I think is really interesting is trying to sort of create these tourism districts. These areas where, and that's where, you really, and we don't really have those as much in the U.S. I mean, the closest thing we have is like Walt Disney World Resort or stuff like that.
We don't have them at all.
Even
I was
then,
thinking in California, we don't really have it at all. It's not a, and I was also thinking again about, I was just thinking about like our infrastructure is really not set up at all for international tourists. I don't know why they put up with Americans, or America at all.
Well, and it's interesting, but again, as I said, there in most of the travel I've done, and to places that you wouldn't think English would necessarily be that common a language, like in Riyadh, very common. I mean, everybody spoke enough English that they could, even the Uber drivers spoke enough English that they could get me where I needed to go, and I could ask basic questions. So, but I think that the idea of if they're able to sort of create the entertainment area, district, island, whatever, then they can focus their efforts there.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
I think creating the district and making the district easily accessible, the creature comfort thing you talk about, I keep thinking about the, not only do we not have a district like that, at most places, the closest would be Walt Disney World, but there's not like a train that connects MCO to Walt Disney, and there's no, I mean, even LAX, I've always heard this from people and I've always brushed it off, but LAX is a nightmare. If I didn't speak English and I landed at LAX, I have no idea what I would do. I would be completely, befuddled because there's no public transit. And that's the thing, I can get on trains here and at least there's a map. At least I can find an English version of the map and navigate around. Or I was lost at Tokyo Station. This really small, like 8-year-old Japanese boy helped me. And it was the cutest thing in the world. I was like, I can't find this line. And he was like, it's over there. I was like, oh my God, thank you. But that kind of stuff, it's you can't do that. I mean, you can't, you can't. So anyway, the district thing, I think, is, to your point, that's a really, here, I think the district would be the place where Disney is, where essentially what they've done is you can take the public transit from any airport and you can take it to the, the designated Maihama stop. And then that stop is like up here. And then you walk down a little bit and then you enter into the resort line, which still accepts the same subway passes. So you can use the same pass, but then the resort line runs you all the way around, like the bubble, I would say. And the English in this bubble is much, much higher than even in the shopping district. And you can tell it's like, oh, they kind of have, like when I went to check in, I checked in at the Sheraton and it was the most English I've heard the whole time. When you're checking in, like, oh, welcome this way. And everything was, yeah. I mean, you almost don't notice it until it's not there. I think when you're like trying to check in and you're like, I don't know.
Well, and again, it's no different. It's no different than what they're trying to build in Abu Dhabi on Yas Island. I mean, Yas Island is designed to be their entertainment district, their entertainment island. And, you can get there now, I will say my experience was English was pretty much spoken to some degree everywhere. But it's because also they're working very, very hard to be more of an international
city. I think
it
would be English and Mandarin, right, for them, right?
For
I wouldn't think you'd want
for Abu Dhabi.
Wouldn't you want to have English and
surprisingly it's English, it's English, Mandarin, Russian.
Okay.
Those are and of course Arabic. Yep. Those are the ones that I experienced were most common. But one of the things that they're working on right now is they don't have the monorail system like they do in Japan. So what they're trying to do with Yas Island is they are creating these autonomous vehicles, both for buses and for cabs, that can get you all around the island. And I've heard that they've also looked into like the Disney's Skyliner in Orlando. That has not been quite as openly received But when I was there last year, they were doing the beta testing on all of the autonomous vehicles, and the bus system was even the bus system with drivers was incredibly inexpensive, and Ubers were everywhere. So they were really doing everything they could to foster that comfort of making it easy for the, and I'm gonna do a gross stereotype here, but for the terrified American, they made it as easy as possible to get around Yas Island.
Yep.
And they're continuing to grow on that. So that transportation element is huge. But I think that, when you say you're trying to find that balance between local tourism and international tourism, I think that by creating a tourist area, which is, as you say, Disney and the surrounding. It's in Orlando, it's the Walt Disney World, and now the Universal Complex and iDrive and all that. So it's been growing and growing and growing. But then there are parts, people don't realize there are parts of Orlando that are neighborhoods. They're just, little 1920s bungalows. So I think that is a great opportunity for them to continue to expand both local and international tourism by creating for the locals, here's where we're going to do tourism, and we will make sure that we can somehow accommodate both in some way or another.
I think we need to move on. We went on a sidetrack with that, but I think we basically covered the second story, which we had, which was that there is a little bit of a I think a merging going on in that area, and it sounds like it's the
in Saudi?
Yep. And it sounds like here from Riyadh, the story from the Arab News is that the leisure firm Saudi Entertainment Ventures is set to be incorporated into Qiddiya Investment Company, an affiliate of the Kingdom's Sovereign Wealth Fund, and the integration of the firm, also known as Seven, another subsidiary of the Public Investment Fund, will strengthen the objectives of advancing the entertainment concept, nurturing local talents and capabilities, and improving the quality of life across the kingdom. So it sounds to me like, this is a lot of money and a lot of things folding into each other, but it seems like it's exactly what we just covered, in that they want to bring it all together so they can bring it all, they can make a little, bubble, basically.
Absolutely. Qiddiya will be the Yas Island for Saudi. Yep. And they want to, they're investing heavy and hard, and they've actually gone so far as to say they have a deadline where they want to be the vacation capital of the world, really. So they're continuing to grow. They're continuing to educate. They're doing it in a very smart way. They're continuing to invest money into it because they, right now they have very deep oil money pockets, and they're trying to invest not only the money, but they're also investing in a great deal of education and training. Yeah. So that will be a really cool element to this, so that they can deal with the multi-language issues, so that they're prepared for locals versus outside. It's they're learning from everyone. The folks from GIA and the Qiddiya Investment Company and Seven are in all of the major areas around the world that have theme parks and bring in tourism. And they're learning from everyone. So, it sounds like a good model, and it's something that perhaps they could dive even a little bit deeper into in Tokyo to help with the issues there.
Well, someone in the U.S. who is having issues is United Parks. Let's see. Well, actually, first United Parks. We may not get to this, but the people having real issues is Cedar Fair and Six Flags. But United Parks so far has been doing pretty well. We'll link to this so you can read more about it. We want to go pretty quick on this story, but essentially their EBITDA is up, a 9.3% increase for United Parks in their adjusted EBITDA. And specifically what the CEO said is, while attendance in the quarter benefited from a positive calendar shift, with the Easter holidays, benefit was almost entirely offset by unusually wet and cold weather during the quarter, particularly on certain peak attendance days, and mainly in our Florida parks, which is funny because everyone seems to be digging on the climate issues in Florida, and I'm like, well, then do something about it. In in-park cap revenue, including the impact of certain one-time revenue, increased 4%, blah, blah, blah. Essentially, they had a pretty good run, and they did mention that a big factor in this is, of course, SeaWorld Abu Dhabi, which we were just talking about. And I think they seem, again, like we were talking about, it's kind of being like, they receive some one-time payments from this, but they expect that investment to, develop over time. And in the meantime, their other parks are doing, I guess, better than anticipated. It seemed like the EBITDA was better than they anticipated, even aside the weather issues. So I guess we'll see. They had a lot of openings. United Parks has been lining up a lot of openings for the summer. But again, the weather all these parks could continue to haunt them because a lot of their openings are in the Florida parks. So.
Well, and the other thing to keep in mind too is United Parks, main brand right now is still SeaWorld, and SeaWorld is celebrating its 60th anniversary this year. So, which is actually the 60th anniversary of the opening of the San Diego park, but it is 60 years of SeaWorld, and they're doing a lot of investment in that. They're new rides, new attractions, new parades, new festivals, and what they're trying to do is they're trying to roll them out in multiple parks. But they'll have slightly different names, slightly different designs. But this past week, I was in San Antonio, and their new water ride there is Catapult Falls, which is very similar to Infinity Falls, which is very, so they're doing it in a large corporate way, but they are still continuing to invest in the parks, and I think I'm excited to see that they're starting to see a little turnaround here because of that investment. Yeah. I know the weather is a challenge, but at the same time, I hope that they see a positive reaction to their investments.
Yep. I want to talk about the differences here, but just really quick to set the stage. Cedar Fair and Six Flags are struggling. The Q1 was not great for them. Both chains had increases in their net losses. So Six Flags saw an 18% increase in net loss, and Cedar Fair saw a net loss of $133 million. And they just said that that they're excited about the merger and that they see it going forward, and they've complied with the DOJ's request and blah blah blah. But all that being said, the Camp Snoopy reopening at Knott's Berry Farm was delayed. And not only was it delayed, but I think, Scott, you might have seen too, but some of the people we know that have worked on the projects have kind of shared openly that a lot of the design basically was EV'd out, and that it's, not only is it construction delays, but it's not going to be what it was promised to be. And that, it's very upsetting for all the designers on it. So I don't know. I mean, these are kind of like mixed signals. I'm kind of like, if you put two struggling park chains together, does that make them not struggle? Because I don't know. I mean, I don't know how far economies of scale are going to take you, to reduce that much of a shortfall. But 113 million is more than you're going to say by cutting the accounting department down. But I don't know, Scott. Tell me, what are the parks doing differently? Like, why is it that United Parks is doing good and these parks are not doing good?
Well, I think it's that I think the challenge is let's just focus on Six Flags for a minute. Six Flags has had some rather significant ups and downs over the last couple decades, really. They went through this massive expansion where they pretty much bought up any park that even looked like it was for sale. Mm-hmm. And they expanded way too quickly, and then didn't have the infrastructure or the financial pockets to actually bring these parks up to speed. So then they had to sell them off. I mean, a specific example is Geauga Lake in Ohio. They bought Geauga Lake. It became a Six Flags property. And this was years ago. It became a Six Flags property before it became Six Flags Geauga Lake, before it became condos. Because then they had to sell off the land, and they blew up and shrunk back down. And that's just not a good business practice. It was oh crap, we made the wrong decision. With them coming together, we had talked about this in a previous episode where we kind of hoped that they would take the best practices of each and put them together to create something new. If you want my personal opinion, I think they're hanging on to until something happens in Qiddiya where there's going to be a gigantic Six Flags park, and it will get that infusion of interest and worldwide media that happened with the SeaWorld parks when Abu Dhabi opened. So I think that whether or not they will see all of the revenue that will be generated by the Qiddiya park, they won't, because it's a joint venture. It's owned. It's actually probably owned by someone else. I don't know the details on that particular agreement, but it will bring certainly new attention to the Six Flags brand, and I think that's why they're going to continue to probably lead with the Six Flags brand and not necessarily the Cedar Fair brand, which will eventually, I would imagine, go away completely. So we'll see. I think that, to your point, you've got a struggling park and you've got a struggling park, and when you put or a struggling chain and a struggling chain, when you put them together, do you have a more struggling chain? Possibly, but hopefully, they're looking, way down the road here, so that when they get an influx of attention, that the U.S. parks will feel a little bit of a boost. And because I know people who work for both companies, now the one company, I really hope that they are able to utilize the teams that they have and their strengths, because the Six Flags strengths and the Cedar Fair strengths are not the same. And I'm hoping that they will find a way to continue to elevate the strengths of both properties or both chains, and so that they can kind of cancel out some of the things that have made them less successful in the past. So I hope they keep their eye on the future. We're going to have to keep our eye on the future because we are out of time. So looking towards the future, we hope that you will join us again next week for Green Tag Theme Park in 30. Philip will still be traveling, and I'll be somewhere. I don't even know where I am the next time we record. But anyway, on behalf of Philip Hernandez with Gantom Lighting and the Haunted Attraction Network, and myself, Scott Swenson, with Scott Swenson Creative Development, this is Green Tagged Theme Park in 30, and we will see you and all of your friends next week.